Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to immerse ourselves in the relationships as well as the written text that constitutes Torah. We are in Parshat Tzav, which is in the book of Leviticus, beginning at chapter 6. And I want to begin first by thanking David Phillips for leading a wonderful discussion last week. David, thank you so much for your guidance, your wisdom, and your grace. I know it was very much appreciated, certainly by me. Thank you very much, David. God bless.
Well, thank you. The credit goes to the participants as much or more than it does to me. And I want to apologize to everybody else out there that I pressed the wrong button when I was supposed to be recording.
Okay.
David did a wonderful job. He's being very humble. He's being very humble. You did a great job, David.
Of
Thank
course.
you.
Thank you again, David.
Records, David.
So let's do this. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute, we can have an opportunity to recite our blessing, giving thanks for this moment. Baruch atah
Adonai
Eloheinu
Eloheinu melech haolam
asher
asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav tzivanu la'asot divrei Torah.
Thank you, God, for this opportunity to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. We'll read through the English translation of our Torah portion. I'll share with you a focused study on it, and then we'll open it up for our collaborative conversation about it. I'll share with you the opening verses, and then I'll invite others to have an opportunity to read as well. So chapter 6 in the book of Leviticus. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Command Aaron and his sons thus, this is the ritual of the burnt offering. The burnt offering itself shall remain where it is, burned upon the altar all night until morning, while the fire on the altar is kept going on it." And Steve, would you like to read a little bit, starting at verse 3?
The priest shall dress in linen raiment with linen breeches next to his body, and he shall take up the ashes to which the fire has reduced the burnt offering and the altar and place them beside the altar. He shall then take off his vestments and put on other vestments and carry the ashes outside the camp to a clean place. The fire on the altar shall be kept burning, not to go out. Every morning the priest shall feed wood to it, lay out the burnt offering on it, and turn into smoke the fat parts of the offerings of well-being. A perpetual fire should be kept burning on the altar, not to go out.
Thank you. And Sherry, would you like to read a little bit?
Thank you. And this is the ritual of the meal offering. Aaron's sons shall present it before the Lord in front of the altar. A handful of the choice flour and oil of the meal offering shall be taken from it, with all the frankincense that is on the meal offering. And this token portion shall be turned into smoke on the altar as a pleasing odor to the Lord. Do you want me to continue?
Sure.
Okay. What is left shall be eaten by Aaron and his sons. It shall be eaten as unleavened cakes in the sacred precinct. They shall eat it in the enclosure of the tent of meeting. It shall not be baked with the leaven. I have given it as a portion from my offerings by fire. It is most holy, like the sin offering and the guilt offering. Only the males among Aaron's descendants may eat of it, as their due for all the time throughout the ages from the Lord's offerings by fire. Anything that touches these shall become holy.
Thank you so much. Richard, you want to read a little bit there, verse 12?
Yes, thank you. The Eternal One spoke to Moses, saying, "This is the offering that Aaron and his sons shall offer to the Eternal on the occasion of his anointment. A tenth of an ephah of choice flour as a regular meal offering, half of it in the morning and half of it in the evening. Shall be prepared with oil on a griddle. You shall bring it well soaked and offer it as a meal offering of baked slices, a pleasing odor to the Eternal. And so shall the priest anointed from among his sons to succeed him prepare it. It is the Eternal's, a law for all time, to be burned entirely into smoke. So too, every meal offering of a priest shall be a whole offering, it shall not be eaten.
Joan, do you want to read a little bit there?
Thank you. The Eternal One spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and to his sons thus. This is the ritual of the purgation offering. The purgation offering shall be slaughtered before the Eternal, at the spot where the burnt offering is slaughtered. It is most holy. The priest who offers it as a purgation offering shall eat of it. It shall be eaten in the sacred precinct, in the enclosure of the tent of meeting. Anything that touches its flesh shall become holy. And if any of the blood is splattered upon a garment, you shall wash the bespattered part in the sacred precinct. An earthen vessel in which it was boiled shall be broken. If it was boiled in a copper vessel, the vessel shall be scoured and rinsed with water. Only the males in the priestly line may eat of it. It is most holy. But no purgation offering may be eaten from which any blood is brought into the tent of meeting. For expiation in the sanctuary, any such shall be consumed in fire."
Thank you. Dave Leb, would you like to read starting at the beginning of chapter 7?
This is the ritual of the guilt offering. It is most holy. The guilt offering shall be slaughtered at the spot where the burnt offering is slaughtered, and the blood shall be dashed on all sides of the altar. All of its fat shall be offered, the broad tail, the fat that covers the entrails, the 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them at the loins, and the protuberance on the liver, which shall be removed with the kidneys. The priest shall turn them into smoke on the altar as an offering by fire to Adonai. It is a guilt offering. Only the males in the priestly line may eat of it. It shall be eaten in the sacred precinct. It is most holy.
Thank you, Dave. June, would you like to continue there at verse 7?
Thank you, Rabbi. The guilt offering is like the purification offering. The same rule applies to both. It shall belong to the priest who makes expiation thereby. So too, the priest who offers a man's burnt offering shall keep the skin of the burnt offering that he offered. Further, any meal offering that is baked in an oven and any that is prepared in a pan or on a griddle shall belong to the priest who offers it. But every other meal offering with oil mixed in or dry shall go to the sons of Aaron, all alike. This is the ritual of the sacrifice of well-being that one may offer to the Lord. If he offers it for thanksgiving, he shall offer together with the sacrifice of thanksgiving unleavened cakes with oil mixed in, unleavened wafers spread with oil, and cakes of choice flour with oil mixed in, well soaked. This offering, with cakes of leavened bread added, he shall offer along with his thanksgiving sacrifice of well-being. Out of this he shall offer one of each kind as a gift to the Lord. It shall go to the priest who dashes the blood of the offering of well-being, and the flesh of his thanksgiving sacrifice of well-being shall be eaten on the day that it is offered. None of it shall be set aside until morning.
Thank you, June. Jim, would you like to read starting at verse 16?
Thank you, Rabbi. If, however, the sacrifice he offers is a votive or a free will offering, it shall be eaten on the day that he offers the sacrifice, and what is left of it shall be eaten on the morrow. What is then left of the flesh of the sacrifice shall be consumed in fire on the 3rd day. If any of the flesh of his sacrifice of well-being is eaten on the 3rd day, it shall not be acceptable. It shall not count for him who offered it. It is an offensive thing, and the person who eats it shall bear his guilt. Flesh that touches anything unclean shall not be eaten. It shall be consumed in fire. As for other flesh, only he who is clean may eat such flesh. But the person who he is clean may eat with flesh. But the person who in a state of uncleanliness eats flesh from Adonai's sacrifices of well-being, that person shall be cut off from the kin.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much. Margot, would you like to continue at verse 22
you.
of chapter
When
7?
when a person touches anything unclean,
And this is
Yeah.
verse 22 of chapter 7?
I thought it was we're in 21. Okay, 22. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the Israelite people thus: You shall eat no fat of ox or sheep or goat. Fat from animals that died or were torn by beasts may be put to any use, but you must not eat it. If anyone eats the fat of animals from which offerings by fire may be made to the Lord, the person who eats it shall be cut off from his kin. And you must not consume any blood, either of bird or of animals, in any of your settlements. Anyone who eats blood shall be cut off from his kin.
Thank you, Margot. Let me invite Robin. Would you like to continue at verse 28?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. And Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the Israelite people thus: The offering to Adonai from a sacrifice of well-being must be presented to the one who offers that sacrifice of well-being to Adonai. One's own hands shall present Adonai's offerings by fire. The offerer shall present the fat with the breast to be elevated as an elevation offering before Adonai. The priest shall turn the fat into smoke on the altar, and the breast shall go to Aaron and his sons. And the right thigh from your sacrifices of well-being you shall present to the priest as a gift. He from among Aaron's sons who offers the blood and the fat of the offering of well-being shall get the right thigh as his portion. For I have taken the breast of elevation offering and the thigh of gift offering from the Israelites, from their sacrifices of well-being, and given them to Aaron the priest and to his sons as their due from the Israelites for all time.
Thank you, Robin. Mark Thompson, would you like to continue there at verse 35?
Yes, I would. Thank you. Those shall be the prerequisites of Aaron, the perquisites of his sons from the Lord's offering by fire, once they have been inducted to serve the Lord as priests. These the Lord commanded to be given them once they had been anointed as a due from the Israelites for all time throughout the ages. Such are the rituals of the burnt offering, the meal offering, the sin offering, the guilt offering, the offering of ordination, and the sacrifice of well-being, with which the Lord charged Moses on Mount Sinai when he commanded that the Israelites present their offerings to the Lord in the wilderness of Sinai.
Thank you, Mark. Let me invite Susan and David, if you'd like to pick up there at the start of chapter 8.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take Aaron and his sons with him, and the garments, and the anointing oil, and the offense offering bull, and the 2 rams, and the basket of flatbread, and assemble all the community at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And Moses did as the Lord had charged him, and the community assembled at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And Moses said to the community, This is the thing that the Lord charged to do. And Moses brought forward Aaron and his sons and bathed them in water. And he placed the tunics on them and girded them with the sash and dressed them in the robe and put the ephod over it and girded it with the ornamental band of the ephod and tied it to him with it. And he put the breastplate on him and placed in the breastplate the Urim and the Thummim. And he put the turban on his head. And he put upon the turban at the front the golden diadem, the holy crown, as God had charged Moses.
And Moses took the anointing oil, and he anointed the tabernacle and everything that was in it. So he consecrated them. And he sprinkled some of it on the altar 7 times and anointed the altar and all of its equipment and the basin and its stand to consecrate them. And he poured some of the anointing oil on Aaron's head and anointed him to consecrate him. And Moses brought forward Aaron's sons and dressed them in coats and belted them with a sash and put on hats for them, as Hashem had commanded Moses.
Thank you, David. Let me invite Marty, if you'd like to pick up there at verse 14.
Thank you, Rabbi. He led forward the bull of sin offering. Aaron and his sons laid their hands upon the head of the bull of sin offering, and it was slaughtered. Moses took the blood and with his finger put some on each of the horns of the altar, cleansing the altar. Then he poured out the blood at the base of the altar. Thus he consecrated it in order to make expiation upon it. Moses then took all the fat that was about the entrails and the protuberance of the liver and the 2 kidneys and their fat and turned them into smoke on the altar. The rest of the bull, its hide, its flesh, and its dung, he put to the fire outside the camp, as the Lord had commanded Moses.
Thank you, Martin. Paul, would you like to read starting at verse 18?
Thank you, Rabbi. Then he brought near the ram for the burnt offering, and Aaron and his sons leaned their hands upon the head of the ram. He slaughtered it, and Moses threw its blood upon the altar all around. He cut the ram into its parts. Moses caused the head, the parts, and the fats to go up in smoke. He washed the innards and the feet with water. Moses caused the entire ram to go up in smoke on the altar. It was a burnt offering for a satisfying aroma. It was a fire offering to Hashem, as Hashem had commanded Moses.
Thank you, Paul. Let me invite Robert, if you'd like to continue at verse 22.
Yes, thank you. And he brought the other ram, the ram of consecration, and Aaron and his sons laid their hands upon the head of the ram, and he slew it. And Moses took of the blood of it and put it upon the tip of Aaron's right ear, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe of his right foot. And he brought Aaron's sons, and Moses put of the blood upon the tip of their right ear, and upon the thumbs of their right hands, and upon the great toes of their right feet. And Moses sprinkled blood upon the altar round about. And he took the fat and the rump and all the fat that was upon the inwards, and the caul above the liver, and the 2 kidneys and their fat, and their right shoulder. And out of the basket of unleavened bread that was before the Lord, he took 1 unleavened cake and a cake of oiled bread and 1 wafer, and put them on the fat and upon the right shoulder.
Thank you so much, Robert. Emma, would you like to read a little bit? We're at verse 27. Okay.
No, thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, Emma, thank you so much. Jay, would you like to continue reading at verse 27?
Thank you, Rabbi. He placed all these on the palms of Aaron and on the palms of his sons, and elevated them as an elevation offering before Adonai. Then Moses took them from their hands and turned them into smoke on the altar with the burnt offering. This was an ordination offering for a pleasing odor. It was a gift to Hashem. Moses took the breast and elevated it as an elevation offering before Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. It was Moses' portion of the ram of ordination, and Adonai, as Adonai had commanded Moses. And Moses took some of the anointing oil and some of the blood that was on the altar and sprinkled it upon Aaron and upon his vestments, and also upon his sons and their vestments. Thus he consecrated Aaron and his vestments, and also his sons and their vestments. Continue.
Thank you. Anna, would you like to read it?
Sure. Moses said to Aaron and his sons, boil the flesh at the entrance of the tent of meeting and eat it there with the bread that is in the basket of ordination, as I commanded. Aaron and his sons shall eat it, and what is left over of the flesh and the bread you shall consume in fire. You shall not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting for 7 days, until the day that your period of ordination is completed, for your ordination will require 7 days. Everything done today, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh has commanded to be done 7 days to make expiation for you. You shall remain at the entrance of the tent of meeting day and night for 7 days, keeping Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh's charge, that you may not die, for so I have been commanded. And Aaron and his sons did all the things that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had commanded through Moses.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone. That's our entire Torah portion. If you have a copy of the study sheet, I invite you to take it out. And just as a little bit of setting up for the discussion I'd like to share with you. I was thinking about these sacrificial rites that we've just been reading about and thinking about, well, how can we approach them? How can we begin to process this bit of material in this sacred text? And I guess there are several ways. And one way is to view them with a kind of sense of historical detachment, that these are rituals that occurred thousands of years ago in a very different culture, a very different time, and have absolutely nothing to do with us. And then I thought, well, there's another way, which is perhaps there's something embedded within what is being presented to us that bears some enduring meaning and truth for us. And so as I was kind of pondering these different approaches, I came across this painting by Osnat Sadok, who is, she was born in Israel and then moved to Canada, where she lives now. And this is her painting called Fire Within. And of course, a lot of the material that we've been reading in this week's text has to do with fire. So I was intrigued by this. And in number one is a statement from her artistic statement about what it means to her to be a painter. And she writes, as a spiritual person, but especially as an artist, flow is my motto. Flow is the art of letting things happen. It is where the subconscious is leading the conscious and where the apparent is giving way to the hidden. I was very intrigued by that notion that for her, especially as an abstract artist, she's not trying to clarify, if you will, reality around us. She's trying to take us to those places that are lacking in clarity, that in a sense, she's trying to take us deeper into mystery rather than deeper into clarification. And so I was intrigued by that notion, especially you looking at the image of the fire and wondering, well, perhaps rather than using merely logic and reason and our rationality and our sense of detachment to be able to analyze things, perhaps we should kind of go with the flow, as our artist is suggesting to us, and allow the subconscious to lead the conscious and to go places that are beyond the apparent and to the hidden. So to explore that sense of hidden possibilities within the material that we're reading, we'd like to look at something that was written by Rabbi Pinchas Peli. Rabbi Pinchas Peli was an Israeli modern Orthodox rabbi who was born in 1930, died of cancer in 1989. And as a pen name, he took the name Peli, which means wonder in Hebrew. He was a very interesting person. He was a strong advocate of interfaith contact and relations. He spent time at the Vatican, and within Israel, he advocated for a separation of church and state, if you will, rather than having a single religious point of view impose itself on civil society. He was rather controversial and wrote a lot of very interesting books. And here he focuses on language that's in our portion and focuses on how to translate some very small but powerfully impactful words. So here's what he wrote. The Jewish Publication Society translates these verses, that is Leviticus 2, which in Hebrew reads,
6:2,
excuse me,
Leviticus 6:2.
thank you, Leviticus 6:2, the Eish HaMizbeach to Kadbo, and from Leviticus chapter 6, verse 5, the Ha'esh al HaMizbeach. The Jewish Publication Society translates these verses respectively as the fire on the altar burns on it, and the fire on the altar. Most of the other English translations of the Bible we consulted offer similar translations, with the exception of the authorized King James Version, which in this case is truer to the Hebrew original in that it distinguishes clearly between the fire burning on the altar, al hamizbeach, and the fire burning in it, to kadbo, or if you wish, in him, namely in the officiating priest. It is not enough to have a fire burning on the altar, says the Hasidic interpretation pointedly, emphasizing that there must also be a perpetual fire of enthusiasm within us when we truly worship God. So now I'm taking a look back at the painting Fire Within by Oznat Sadak. You have here this fire in the center of her work, and you might not be able to tell from this representation of it, but this acrylic paint she has worked up with a palette knife, and so the fire and the glow around it has been raised up off the canvas to give it a three-dimensional effect. In other words, emphasizing the dimensionality of what she's trying to convey on the canvas. And that sense of dimensionality, I think, is what Rabbi Pinchas Peli is pointing out to us here, is being conveyed in the fire, that there are multiple dimensions. There's something happening on the surface, which is what the Hebrew for al hamizbeach, on the altar, is conveying. And then there's something happening internally, on another dimension within, perhaps within the person who is conducting the service itself. And that is conveyed by the Hebrew, the Eish HaMizbeach Tukad, bo, inside. So we have this capacity to either look at what is on the surface, what is apparent, and we also have the capacity to go beyond what is on the surface, what is apparent, to look at something deeper, something more subterranean, something that is within not only the moment, but sometimes within us as well. And that is what the Sfat Emet, one of the great 19th century Hasidic rabbis, is going to be focusing on in his comment here in number 3. In the soul of everyone, there lies a hidden point that is aflame with the love of God, a fire that cannot be put out. Even though it may not go out, Leviticus 6:6, here refers to a prohibition, it is also a promise. We also read, the priest shall burn wood upon it each morning. Everyone who worships God may be called a priest. And this arousal of love is the service of the heart, that which takes the place of sacrificial offerings. So here's Sfat Emet is now taking this ancient ritual of something being burned on an altar, which, as Rabbi Peli has indicated, is being hinted at within the Hebrew as there's another dimension beyond what's happening on the surface. There's something happening within the inside, and Sfat Emet is indicating that which is this ritual of fire is also meant to be replicative of a fire burning within each one of us, a fire of love, a service of the heart. And so you turn over, share with you one of the first generations of Hasidic rabbis, the Maggid of Mezerich, who's also going to be commenting on Leviticus chapter 6, verse 6. Says, instead of reading the phrase, lo tichmeh, as it shall not be put out, we can read it as it will put out the knot. The spark burning within the recesses of the heart, if it is fed with the fuel of love, will burn continually. The fire of love extinguishes the negative. And we have this from Proverbs: the soul of a person is God's candle. And from our Sufi poet Rumi, we have this: there is a candle in your heart ready to be kindled. There is a void in your soul ready to be filled. You feel it, don't you? You feel the separation from the beloved. Invite him to fill you up. Embrace the fire. So as I was thinking about all these rituals that we're reading in the book of Leviticus, we can either look at them with a sense of detached interest, a bit of history, an artifact from another time, or we can read them as one iteration, one presentation of an enduring truth, which is that there is a fire within us that can be stoked for good purposes, to be stoked to sublimate, if you will, the beastly part of ourselves, perhaps, to be sublimated as energy to be used for good and as a source of light in the world. Of course, I thought of that this week when we had another tragic mass shooting. And I thought, either religious rituals have a purpose, which can either be looked at with a sense of detachment and irrelevance and merely gone through kind of in a sense of rote and routine, or we can see that religious rituals are designed to provoke within us a looking elsewhere other than the site where the ritual itself is happening. That it's meant to draw our attention not to the place where the rite or ritual is happening, but it's supposed to point us in some other direction. And in this case, I think these rituals are helping us to point us in the direction of an interior flame, which we can stoke for goodness in this world. And with that, I'd love to open it up and hear what you experienced as we read through this week's portion. If you raise your hand, I'd so love to call upon you. June, please go ahead and unmute and share with us.
I'm going back to the painting.
Yeah.
It looks to me on the right side that there's Hebrew writing there. Is that my imagination? Or where you see where the H is on the bottom, next to it looks like Hebrew letters to me.
If it is your imagination, that's perfectly great. Tell me why you think that might be there.
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Okay.
But I think it, the flame inside, it could be like the Torah, a scroll, and the fire within, and something on that. It just came to me that it's got to be some writing and looking inside flame.
Right. So what you're sharing is perhaps that image evokes for you the notion of not just a flame, but a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll, and perhaps the notion that the combustible energy that Hebrew letters convey as sources of creation. Those are lovely notions. All right. Thank you so much. Let me invite Mark and then Jay and Dave. Go ahead, Mark.
Thanks. My imagination is getting a little carried away as well. But when I look at that painting, I almost sort of see a figure enveloped, and that the fire is already happening within that figure. The other thing I was thinking about was prayer, and how, especially for those of us who have the privilege of leading congregations in prayer, how sometimes the surface of the prayer tends to be rote if it's done on a regular basis, and that it really is up to the Shaliach Tzibor, to the leader of prayer, to kindle that fire within to really bring it to life. And I noticed for myself that there is a huge difference when I'm able to bring that forth. But it's an act, it's a volitional act. It's not something that just happens unless, you happen to be inspired by something. But I really think that this Torah portion speaks to me in that regard, that to me, it has to do something with prayer.
Lovely. And that is really what the Sfat Emet is also referring to about the service of the heart. I think he's trying to talk about prayer as a source of ignition. Too often for many of us, prayer services can be a cooling experience, right? Because someone else is doing it for us and we're just sitting there. But it can be a source of ignition, which is what you're talking about. Then we become real sources of sacred energy in this world. So
and the other thing I wanted to mention too, to follow up on that, is that it's often, I think we've talked about this before, that when you're in a sanctuary and you have the rabbi and the cantor leading the prayer, it's almost as if you absolve yourself of the responsibility of creating that fire from within. You're leaving it up to them to provide that for you. And I think that's a mistake.
Yeah. So we could have a lovely conversation about prayer service and the tradition within Judaism about who leads prayer and what it takes to be a Shliach Tzibur, a prayer leader for a community, and the extent to which in modern times that has become professionalized. Right. And which tends to be a bit of cooling water. So thank you very much for being an igniting prayer leader. Thank you. Let me call upon Jay and Dave, and then I'll call on Steve, and then we'll get over to Susan and David. So Jay.
Thank you, Rabbi. Once again, on my Word program, which is LibreOffice, I was able to, on the big screen here, rotate this portrait, this painting, and see it enlarged from various, even at an angle, but mostly up, down, and sideways. I recommend because there's a fire within the earth, as you see, poking out with volcanic activity all over. It never goes out. There's a fire with the Ner Tamid that does not go out. But I was looking in the commentary, and it seems like, if you could correct me, and I just missed it. I'm in the Eitz Chaim from the Eitz Chaim publication. The word Torah, does it not lead to some connection between the sacrificial Judaism and the prayer Judaism? Is there not some connection? Because I was reading the commentary to the Haftarah after this from Jeremiah, and it was at a time, I believe, when where the sacrifices were banned or were going to be banned. And just saying that the fire within the loving kindness and all of that, keeping that going, is what's going to substitute for these sacrificial rites. It's an awareness of Hashem and a connection to Him. That's all.
Well, and also what you're also reminding me about is that the whole notion from the earliest rabbis that once the temple was destroyed, then each household became a site for an altar, for a site for bringing offerings to God. And so the sense of this dispersal rather than a centralized source of authority that the temple had represented. So thank you for that.
Plus, turning the painting can make for some type of an incredible sunrise or sunset. The imagination can probably go crazy with this. It's a wonderful work. I'd love to see it in person.
Okay, I'm so glad you like it, Jay. Thank you for pointing that out. And Dave, Lev, yeah.
Okay, pretty much a lot from what Mark said. I kind of do see a human figure there, with the brightest part of that figure being where the heart and lungs would be.
Ah.
where the soul of the person may be.
Hmm.
And secondly, I kind of see the law of radiation. The furthest away you get from its source, the light turns into your infrareds and eventually disappears.
Wow, thank you for introducing that element to us. And I love the notion about the hottest part, you say,
The
usually,
brightest part, yes.
yeah, around the heart. That's lovely. Thank you. All right, David and Susan, then Steve, then Robert.
I think you had Steve going before me.
Okay,
You did it first when you said
thank
it,
you.
but
All right, Steve, would you like to?
Oh, yeah, and I missed the place here. I wondered why God did not want people to drink the blood of animals.
Yeah, why do you think?
Because the reason why I'm present in France, that's a delicacy, boudin, which is all the slaughterhouse bread is made into like a sausage. They take the intestines and put it in. One thing that impressed me when I was a student in France, they said in France, we eat everything they throw out in all the other countries. So I don't know whether it was an early conservation movement on their part, yet they have very strict prohibitions, like they only have a boucherie will only have meat from cattle, and a charcuterie will only have meat from pigs. You know, that's separated, so you don't have trichinosis going from one to the other. And Pasteur was a Frenchman that introduced pasteurization.
Right. Well, if you were to play with this notion that blood was seen as the river of conveying life within all creatures, if you were to play with that notion, why might there be some kind of prohibition, injunction about not consuming that bit of stream of life from another creature? What might be the reaning behind that?
well, Rabbi,
Yeah.
since you're so good at asking us what we were thinking of, what were you thinking when you asked that question?
No, I'm just
Well, yes.
just
Well,
yeah, go Richard.
I've heard it said that to insult somebody in public is to shed their blood.
Okay, and then so how
Well,
does
that the blood is in the heart, and it's all been written on our hearts, and we don't need the sacrifices. I was concerned that in one of the translations someone read, it's called a sin offering, and in others it's called an offering of purgation. And my idea is that way back when, in those years, that's a time when people were learning to integrate what these rules are and how you get there, and you have to go through stages. And purgation is getting rid of the sin, is vomiting, is being purged, and it's getting cleaned out. And so you go down below and find in your innards the repressed sins, the repressed greeds. And when you're purged of that, then you're ready to go join God in the effort of making a better world. And you talked about the flow, and I think of flow as that's the duration of the soul that continues to move through us and carry the energy of that candle out if we don't stuff it out with our ego and our greeds. But that's what endures and is there for us to access by letting go of this other stuff, by purging those other things, so we can walk forward to the altar or walk forward to the tent and join with God, and we sanctify that relationship with God. That's all.
Thank you. Let me call upon David and Susan, then David and Susan. Yeah.
Last week, one of the things I studied and got my head into was the Hasidic, and probably not just Hasidic, understanding of the sacrifice as being something that is happening inside the person doing the sacrifice. you, if you were imagining yourself doing a sacrifice, as well as the thing that's happening exteriorly. And I was very puzzled by what that might mean. But there's a lot of things that I read that said that there are analogies to what's happening on the altar and the burning of the altar and the fire and the raising up into a pleasing odor and smoke that ends up high in the heavens. And Richard, and even more so, I think Justin talked about some shamanistic stages that I wasn't completely clear about, but seemed to say that you who were raising your animalistic side higher, elevating it, using your and then and that's what you're sacrificing and going up in smoke. And that was a significant insight for me. And I just wanted to mention it tonight, and also mention about David Leap's heart of fire, is that the heart is the seat of thinking and understanding as well as feeling in these ancient days.
So, David, what you got me to think about is a song that Johnny Cash sings that was written by his son-in-law, The Beast in Me. And he sings about the beast in me is a terrible and ravaging thing. And it's very compelling, especially when listening to Johnny Cash sing it, because we know of all the demons that he dealt with that were raging around inside of him. And what you're also referring to is what Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of Chabad Judaism, talks about how we all have the beast self dwelling within us. And what our goal is, in a sense, is to render immaterial, to render into smoke, or as one of the great Sions of the Hasidic family, Sigmund Freud, said, the idea is to sublimate, to take these urges that could otherwise be destructive if they were just let loose, and you sublimate them for a higher purpose. So that's some of the imagery that you're sharing. So I'm very grateful for you doing that. Let me call upon Robert, and then Joan, you wanted to share something.
You said Joan first.
Well, Robert had
Oh, okay.
thing.
No, please let her go
Okay,
ahead.
Joan, you've given the moment.
Oh, well, I was just thinking that this is to get back to the purpose of the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Was really the relationship that we have with God, and that this is all in service to Him. And so the sacrifice, it's all about what we're giving to God in our attempt to have a relationship with Him, including if blood is life, that blood is to be on the altar for God, not for our own consumption or for any other use, and therefore we shouldn't be eating blood. I mean, it's all about our
Giving it over,
Mhm.
giving ourselves over, giving the best of ourselves over, giving.
That's how we'll find
Put our blood
love
to
and
work as well.
happiness. Yeah.
What's that?
Put our blood to work in the world.
So what you've also reminded us is the notion about what this is describing. The word korban, which for sacrifice, is from the Hebrew to draw closer. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. So we're doing this so that we can draw closer to the source of everything.
And I think I've been in the kitchen a lot this week. I've been in the kitchen a lot this. I mean, I know we're trying to go away from the text in a way and interpret the text, but I like to jump back into the text. I mean, it was a bloody mess. I mean, it was just, there was entrails and flesh and blood and it was, and they were covered in that. But that isn't necessarily a negative thing. When you're in the kitchen and you're creating, when you're making a creation, you are, you're working with life.
You're making a partnership with God by getting closer.
Yeah.
And to make a partnership with yourself, Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Ra, the urge to good and the urge to evil. And without both of those inside of us, we get nowhere. So it's about a relationship with ourselves, and maybe God is showing us how to get there on that. But I don't think it's kick one out, and I don't think it's something is all bad and something is all good. I think it's balancing and respecting.
Nice. And let me call upon Robert, and then we'll get to Paul. Robert?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for a lovely evening. I think really everything has pretty much been said. Just a couple brief things. It referred to the blood of fowl. There is no animal that carries salmonella probably better than birds. So if they had eaten the blood of fowl, they may well have thinned the number of the Israelites seriously. The other thing that comes to mind, I've loved the conversation. I've loved the fact that we're really talking about what happens in the soul. I mean, in a way, we could say a person is whatever fire of the love of God that person has. And I think to myself, where is the true altar? Where does the sacrifice happen? Where does the fire happen? And it's been mentioned again and again in different language. And I would say it's the human heart. That's our essence. That's what we are. That's where love lives. That's where darkness and light combat each other day by day, if you will, hour by hour. That's the human nature. And I look at all these sacrifices. What do they represent? And I think we talked about this last week. We had to learn about sacrifice 3,500 years ago. They were sacrificing wealth. I mean, these were valuable animals. They were sacrificing. They were learning about sacrifice over and over and over again. To me, what that means is every day I have to learn, and really all the time. It's not something I can ever forget. I often fail, by the way, so I want to make that clear. But that sacrifice is a process that goes on continually, like breathing, every time we make a choice. And it's this fire of the love of God. And we can test the fire by the light. So if Rabbi comes on, Rabbi Moskowitz comes on and he's loving and kind, there's the light. If he comes on and he says, "Oh, you're all rotten," well, that's the darkness. And of course, you'd never do that. But see, that's the test of the fire. How do we live our lives? Baha'u'llah says, "Bring thyself to account each day ere thou art summoned to a reckoning." And I think that has to do with this. We are our heart. We are our soul. Our intellect, all these things are lovely. But what does God want? He wants our heart. That's what he wants. That's what he wants. That's my understanding.
Thank you, Robert. I'm going to call upon Paul, and then I see Mark has his guitar out, and perhaps he's going to share a song with us to conclude with. And let me call upon Paul first.
Yeah, this coming week, we're going to be looking through the house for chametz and getting rid of that. Now, I compare now to this parsha we're reading. When I have my grandchildren, the three girls, before they come over, I have to empty the refrigerator of all meat. So they're all vegetarians. And so now I am in a situation where there's a whole parsha here, and we're saying it's holy and it's wonderful. I found, because of I did a recent visit of one of the young ladies, they'd like the discussion about the light. The painting would be much more to their taste. And going back to his childhood, we had what I call a gabbai at the shul. And the gabbai turned out to be also the shochet. And he was talking about the problems of him being a shochet when he was trying to get married, because that was not considered to be, we're talking about how holy it is. But even in his times, that he was the guy older than me, it was not considered to be a plus. So that was times where people were meat eaters. So it seems hard when I read, when we had this parsha now, where they're going through all this detail of the goriness, I understand why nobody would want to marry that Gabbai. You know, I mean, it doesn't, I'd rather look at that flame and relation, the idea of an abstract heart, and you see what that was, I found to be holy in a way. And so that's why each week I look at those paintings sometimes, because some of the stuff in the Pasha is a little bit tough.
Well, Paul, I'm glad that we have shared with you a painting that you can share with your granddaughters, and hopefully, you know, they'll see it and embrace it, and of course, embrace you even more than I know they already do. So thank you for sharing that. Let me just check. Susan, was there something that you wanted to say? Because I see you've got a hand there.
I was just going to say that in Judaism, shochet was a holy profession.
That's right. Okay, and Jade, was there something more that you wanted to share before we get to Mark?
I put the lyrics of the song into the chat.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Grateful for that. And Mark Thompson, what would you like to share with us as a concluding piece?
Oh, as we're approaching Pesach, I think we always need to remember that in every generation, we must see ourselves as if we personally went out of Egypt. And I really want to reflect upon our brethren in Israel, especially at this particular time where freedom is at stake. This is Bechol Dor Vador. Bechol Dor Vador Hayav Adam Lirot et atzmo כאילו יצא ממצרים. כל דור ודור חייב אדם לראות כי עצמו כאילו יצא מצרים.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Mark. I hope each and every one of you has a lovely, wonderful, fulfilling, meaningful Pesach around whatever table you will be. It will be the second night of Pesach next Thursday. We won't have our gathering for our Torah study, but I wish each one of you a Hag Sameach, a fulfillment, and a beauty, and may you experience great love.
And
Thank you all very much. Look forward to our next gathering. Be
Thank
well.
you. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.